Welcome to Soldier Study Time, your guide to review items to succeed in your Army career. My name is Carla, and today we'll be reviewing Army Doctrine Publication 1, Chapter 2. Army Doctrine Publication 1 is best known as ADP1. Chapter 2 covers today's Army. ADP1, Chapter 2, Today's Army. To be prepared for war is one of the most effectual means of preserving peace. George Washington. The Army operates in all domains, converging its capabilities to control land, which is the most complex domain of all. This is where conflicts are most often resolved and sustainable outcomes achieved. The land domains includes humanity in its entirety of cultures, religions, social and economic groups, and politics. These can all be drivers of instability and conflict in today's operational environments. The Army enables and influences operations across the air, maritime, space, and cyberspace domains, each of which has influence on the land domain. Winning on land requires soldiers, leaders, and units to have the skills, knowledge, and attributes to operate effectively in ambiguity and chaos. Continuous learning, adaptation, and agility are the keys to winning in lethal and uncertain environments. Operating in the land domain. ADP 1, Chapter 2-1. The variations in climate, terrain, velocity, and complexity of human interaction, and the diversity of populations have a far greater impact on operations in the land domain than in any other domain. The most distinguished characteristic of the land domain is the human element. Humans temporarily transit the air, maritime, and space domains, but they ultimately live on land. Controlling terrain, infrastructure, and populations are uniquely human-oriented endeavors that require soldiers to operate in the midst of political, economic, social, and religious tumult. The human context informs how the Army conducts operations among populations within the military, political, and physical constraints of the environment. Winning battles and engagements alone is insufficient for achieving sustainable outcomes. Army forces consolidate gains with and among populations to ensure battlefield victories translate into long-term success. ADP 1, Chapter 2-2. Geographic combatant commanders implement various security cooperation activities to shape the environment in ways favorable to U.S. interest. Most activities involve working with foreign security forces on the ground. These activities build partner defense capabilities and enhance the overall security of the theater. Our assistance assures our multinational partners and improves joint force access to key regions. The degree of security cooperation communicates U.S. commitment, strength, and awareness to adversaries in those regions. If necessary, combat-ready Army units deployed to threatened areas to reinforce host nation forces, complement joint air and maritime forces, and communicate clear U.S. intent to resist aggression. Partnership develops trust, improves interoperability, and builds shared understanding as our soldiers positively influence host nation forces, leaders, populations, and other government agencies. This partnership produces enduring positive effects for regional stability and effective deterrence. ADP1 Chapter 2 3. Few nations can afford to field and employ a large air force or navy. The principal military forces across the globe are armies. Even in regions often defined by their proximity to large bodies of water. For most nations, defense and security considerations center on land forces. The United States furthers many of its strategic interests using soldiers who work on a daily basis directly with multinational partners to improve their ground forces. Our soldiers make the Army the most capable land force in the world, which in turn maintain U.S. credibility and security. Land Combat ADP 1 Chapter 2 4. Land combat consists of operations against a thinking and lethal enemy in conditions that include violence, chaos, fatigue, fear, and uncertainty. Large-scale ground combat is the most lethal and demanding environment human beings have ever devised to resolve conflict. Soldiers face enemy forces with advanced weapons and sophisticated means of communication. Enemy forces use every means available to achieve their ends, to include terror, criminal activities, and information warfare. They operate in and among combatants for concealment and protection. To an ever-increasing degree, information and cyber activities are inseparable from land operations. Cyber activities directly affect our ability to communicate, meaning that successfully conducting land combat requires protecting friendly networks while exploiting or degrading enemy networks. Compensating for the likelihood of degraded communications and the resulting ambiguity or uncertainty requires highly skilled soldiers in well-trained units able to exercise discipline, initiative, and accept risk. The Army adapts to and compensates for uncertainty with its mission command approach, which focuses each echelon on the purpose of operations in context and not simply on the execution of specific tasks that may no longer contribute to achieving an operational goal. ADP 1 Chapter 2 4. The Army must engage regionally and respond globally. Develop the situation through action. Conduct combined armed operations. Conduct reconnaissance in close contact with the enemy and population. sustain high tempo operations, establish and maintain security, consolidate gains, respond to and mitigate crises in the homeland, ensure institutional and operational synergy and innovation, develop innovative leaders, and optimize human performance. ADP1 Chapter 2-5. Due to the size and number of its combined arms formations, the Army is the only U.S. force capable of defeating threats around the globe during sustained land combat. The Army is uniquely organized, trained, and equipped with the depth and capabilities to be a credible land force deterrent against world and regional powers. Should deterrence fail, the Army, with its unified action partners, makes victory against an enemy decisive. Operational environments. ADP1 Chapter 2-6. Variables within an operational environment pose numerous challenges. The context in which these challenges present themselves adds layers of complexity to military endeavors. Advances in information systems, robotics, directed energy, propulsion, biological engineering, and other fields are changing the world at a rapid pace. The Army, as part of the joint force, must contend with these changes as the swift pace of human interaction and events continues to increase. This environment requires Army units that are trained, equipped, and led to operate across the competition continuum in situations that may include enemies with superior conventional capabilities, weapons of mass destruction, and advanced cyberspace and counterspace capabilities. Our units must operate competently in any terrain and in close coordination with unified action partners. ADP1 Chapter 2-7. To meet global challenges, the Joint Force conducts operations quickly and in sufficient scale to shape an environment, prevent conflict through deterrence, prevail in combat, and consolidate gains to achieve enduring security outcomes. The Army's role in pursuit of these objectives is unique and tied closely to the human dimension. ADP1 Chapter 2-8. Enemies and adversaries are often not easy to identify or locate. State and non-state actors operate against the U.S. openly and covertly. These actors are often armed with the most advanced weapons, while also using simple, low-cost technologies to mitigate U.S. capabilities, exploit vulnerabilities, threaten vital interest, and promote local or regional instability. The Army operates in and amongst populations to counter threats that originate on land but can endanger U.S. interests across multiple domains. Unified Action. ADP 1 Chapter 2-9. The Army operates with other services in a joint comprehensive approach called unified action. Unified action is the synchronization, coordination, and or integration of the activities of governmental and non-governmental entities with military operations to achieve unity of effort, JP1. Unified action partners are those military forces, governmental and non-governmental organizations, and elements of the private sector with whom Army forces plan, coordinate, synchronize, and integrate during the conduct of operations. ADP 3-0. These operations ensure unity of effort and create multiple dilemmas for an enemy force, allowing friendly forces to seize and exploit the initiative. The synergy that results from joint force operations maximizes the capabilities of U.S. military power. ADP1 Chapter 2-10. The complexity and lethality of operations in the land domain demand mastery of combined arms operations, which includes the full array of joint capabilities. Combined arms operations are the synchronized application of two or more elements of one service along with other unified action partners and their capabilities. These operations are an extension of the historical idea of combined arms. The synchronized application of arms to achieve an effect greater than if each arm was used separately. Combined arms is not a new idea. The Army's history contains multiple examples of how well executed combined arms operations led to success on the battlefield. Mastery of combined arms operations remains necessary for success in the 21st century. It can only be achieved through demanding and repetitive training. ADP 1, Chapter 2-11. The Army depends on and supports air and naval forces across all domains. The Army depends on the other services for strategic lift, joint fires, joint intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, and other capabilities. The Army supports other services, combatant commands, multinational forces, and other unified action partners with communications, intelligence, rotary wing aviation, air and missile defense, logistics, command and control, and engineering. Collectively, the Army calls these capabilities Army support to other services. These relationships create joint interdependence or an integration of complementary and reinforcing capabilities at strategic, operational, and tactical levels of warfare. ADP 1, Chapter 2-12. The effects of joint interdependence provide extraordinary support to tactical units. The vast array of joint capabilities enable the employment of small units in decentralized fashion across vast areas. Tactical units can employ precise joint fires with lethal and non-lethal capabilities in minutes, delivered by systems potentially hundreds of miles away. ADP1, Chapter 2-13. In addition to traditional air and maritime threats, the Army and Joint Forces face growing threats in the space domain, and shared access to the space domain increases combined arms effectiveness and integrates joint capabilities. The Army maneuvers over large distances with small units enabled by communications that depend on U.S. space assets. Space systems allow the Army access to communications, positioning, navigation, and timing to deploy and employ rapidly and lethally. Our adversaries understand the importance of space capabilities and continuously develop means to contest them. Army forces must prepare to continue operations effectively when space capabilities are degraded. ADP 1, Chapter 2-14. Threats from cyberspace are continuous and increasing exponentially. Our adversaries and enemies heavily invest in capabilities that can disrupt or deny communication support to U.S. forces while protecting their own systems. Our adversaries routinely collaborate in cyberspace by conducting coordinated tactical operations and strategic level information warfare that threaten U.S. interests. These threats require Army forces that are ready to operate with degraded communications, reduce situational awareness, and within a negative information environment. Army forces conduct cyberspace operations as part of unified action through the range of military operations. Joint missions. ADP 1, Chapter 2-15. The Army gives the combatant commander depth and versatility because land forces can conduct a broad range of operations on a large scale. Army forces offer the combatant commander multiple options to achieve national military objectives. These capabilities include combinations of armored, mechanized, motorized, airborne, and air assault formations. Attack as well as lift and reconnaissance aviation, special operations forces, and long duration sustainment. With their ability to combine diverse capabilities for specific mission requirements, Army forces provide the combatant commander with tailorable and scalable force packages to address a broad range of possible contingencies. This simultaneous use of broad range of friendly capabilities from across the Army, the Joint Force, and Unified Action partners creates dilemmas and narrows options for both adversaries and enemies. ADP 1, Chapter 2-16. The Army provides significant contributions to the accomplishment of the Joint Force prioritized missions established in the National Military Strategy. Joint campaigns may require land operations as part of unified action, since land forces often control areas or assets that influence and enable operations in the other domains. For this reason, Land forces are vital during almost all operations, even in places where maritime or air forces dominate. Joint missions are consistent with the Army's purpose and long-standing role in national defense. ADP1 Chapter 2-17. Most wars and conflicts are won by committing land forces. Land forces not only seize, occupy, and defend land areas, but they often also remain on the ground to consolidate gains until the achievement of U.S. national long-term objectives. Victory rarely stems from a single rapid strike. Swift campaigns are a rare exception to the historical norm. Due to the varying nature of war, conflicts often last months or years. Wars tend to evolve into something quite different from what was originally planned as both sides adapt to impose their will on one another. Land forces prove the most tangible and durable measure of America's commitment to defend its interests, precisely because of the effort and potential cost of doing so. The introduction of land forces signals the nation's willingness to protect multinational partners and deter aggression. A strategic level context for the Army. ADP 1, Chapter 2-18. Readiness for ground combat is and will remain the U.S. Army's first priority. The Army accomplishes its mission by supporting the Joint Force in 4 strategic roles: shaping operational environments, preventing ground combat, and consolidating gains. The strategic roles clarify the enduring reasons for which our Army is organized, trained, equipped. Army forces are further organized, trained, and equipped to provide specific core competencies, delivering essential and enduring capabilities aligned with joint doctrine. The Army's operational concept of unified land operations, described in ADP 3-0, is built on the conceptual framework established by the Army's strategic roles and its core competencies. Title 10, USC, the National Military Strategy, and DODD 5100.01 provide the overall guidance on the capabilities that the Army must provide to the nation. The Army shapes operational environments and prevents conflict based upon the requirements of combatant commanders. The ability to prevail against any enemy during large-scale ground combat is what provides the military credibility necessary to deter war. Every operation must consolidate gains to make temporary operational success enduring and set the conditions for a sustainable and stable environment. Our non-negotiable obligation to the nation is to win by achieving the combatant commander's operational objective when the Army is committed to any type of operation. Shape operational environments. ADP 1, Chapter 2-19. The Army provides unique forces with capabilities to shape operational environments. Shaping operational environments allows combatant commanders to reassure partners and deter aggression while establishing conditions that support the potential employment of joint forces. Army regionally aligned forces, including Special Operations Units, Army Reserve Units, and Army National Guard units, assist partners with internal defense and develop the capabilities needed to deter adversaries and defeat enemies. Army forces further develop relationships with multinational partner land forces, share intelligence, and strengthen their security forces, increase cultural awareness, and conduct bilateral and multilateral military exercises through efforts such as the State Partnership Program. Army National Guard and Reserve units supply unique and dual trained soldiers with special skills obtained and engineering activities, disaster preparedness, critical infrastructure management, and resource protection. Together, these efforts allow the Army to maintain a global land power network that is critical in shaping operational environments and winning wars. Army forces conduct shaping operations through the day-to-day actions of its service component commanders, trainers, advisors, and logistic activities as specified under Title 10 USC and support to Title 22 and Title 50 USC. Prevent conflict. ADP1, Chapter 2-20. Preventing conflict includes all activities that deter adversary military actions, which threaten allies or partners and deny them the ability to achieve objectives counter to U.S. interests. A well-trained, credible, and capable army reduces the risk of aggression by adversaries because it raises both the risk and potential cost of military action to their forces. Moving ready and trained army forces into a region tells adversaries that the United States is prepared and willing to protect its interests. Partner nations under external threats understand that introducing U.S. forces alters the regional military balance of power in their favor and bolsters their resolve to resist aggression. Multinational partners and adversaries recognize that Army forces combined with a nation's joint air, maritime, and space-based forces are dominant and therefore are deterrents to armed conflict. This role meets the objectives described in the National Military Strategy. Prevail in large-scale ground combat. ADP1, Chapter 2-21. The Army's capability and capacity to conduct large-scale ground combat is unique and foundational to its other roles. Only the Army has the capabilities necessary for sustained ground combat anywhere in the world. The credibility inherent in its ability to conduct large-scale ground combat as part of the joint force is a critical part of U.S. conventional deterrence. It is a primary source of assurance to friendly nations and an important factor in worldwide stability. The U.S. Army conducts large-scale ground combat as part of the joint force. When it deploys and fights, the Army both enables and is enabled by the other services when they perform their roles. An army that can defeat any enemy worldwide requires professionally committed leadership, well-equipped and trained units, and proficiency in the conduct of joint and multinational operations. Maintaining the readiness necessary for large-scale ground combat is a difficult and continual process that consumes significant time and resources. Readiness for large-scale ground combat operations saves lives. Consolidate gains. ADP1, Chapter 2-22. Operations to consolidate gains make temporary operational successes enduring and set the conditions to facilitate the transition of control over territory to legitimate authorities. Army forces enable the Joint Force Commander to capitalize on operational success by following through to ensure sustainable conditions on the ground. Consolidation of gains is an integral part of winning armed conflict and is essential to retaining the long-term initiative over determined adversaries. Army forces reinforce and integrate the efforts of all unified action partners when they consolidate gains. Operations serve a higher national purpose in support of U.S. interest and are planned and executed to support that purpose at each echelon. A clear understanding of the higher purpose of the mission and operational environment determines what must happen to consolidate gains during the course of operations. How well ground forces consolidate gains determines in large part how enduring the results of operations will be. Effectively, consolidating gains increases options for national leaders and contributes to decisive outcomes. Win. ADP1 Chapter 2-23. Winning is the achievement of the purpose of an operation and the fulfillment of its objectives. The Army wins when it successfully performs its roles as part of the joint force during operations. It wins when it effectively shapes an operational environment for combatant commanders and when it responds rapidly with enough combat power to prevent war through deterrence. When required to fight, the Army's ability to prevail in large-scale ground combat becomes a decisive factor in breaking an enemy's will to continue fighting. Army forces win when the enemy is defeated to the degree that it can no longer achieve their objectives or effectively contest the joint force on land. To ensure that the military results of combat are not temporary, the Army follows through with its unique capability to consolidate gains and ensure enduring outcomes that are favorable to U.S. interest. Core competencies. ADP 1, Chapter 2-24. Core competencies clearly express how the Army contributes to national defense and joint force operations. The Army's 5 core competencies support the Army mission to ensure forces can achieve the Army's strategic roles. A core competency is not a task. It is a capability stated in general terms. ADP1, Chapter 2-24. U.S. Army Core Competencies are prompt and sustained length combat, combined arms operations that include combined arms maneuver and wide area security, armored and mechanized operations, airborne and air assault operations, special operations, set and sustain the theater for the joint force, integrate national, multinational, and joint power on land. Prompt and sustained land combat. ADP 1, Chapter 2-25. Prompt and sustained land combat is the assigned function of the Army, directed both by Congress in Title 10 U.S.C. and by the ODD 5100.01. This function is a foundation from which the Army builds its ability to win in combat. It is the primary function for which the Army organizes, trains, and equips forces. Prompt land combat is what requires the Army's expeditionary capability, the ability to deploy on short notice, task-organized forces capable of immediately conducting operations upon arrival to austere locations. Sustained land combat requires the Army to campaign with the power to conduct extent operations and continuous consolidation of gains necessary to achieve the objectives set for the Army by the joint force. Sustained land combat spans the range of military operations. It requires a force that can sustain its efforts for as long as necessary and can adapt to unpredictable changes in an operational environment. Combined Arms Operations. ADP 1, Chapter 2-26. All operations are combined arms operations. Combined arms is a synchronized and simultaneous application of arms to achieve an effect greater than if each element was used separately or sequentially. Combined arms include Army capabilities and joint multinational and other unified action partner capabilities. Combined arms operations integrate leadership, information, and each of the war-fighting functions. Use destructively combined arms integrate different capabilities so that responding to one capability makes the enemy vulnerable to another. Combined arms multiply the effects of Army and joint capabilities in operations. They require highly trained soldiers, skilled leaders, and integrated information systems. Commanders synchronize combined arms capabilities using command and control to employ combat power to their best advantage. ADP 1, Chapter 2-27. Combined arms maneuver is the application of combat power in time and space to defeat enemy ground forces. Seize, occupy, and defend terrain and achieve physical, temporal, and psychological advantages over the enemy. Combined arms maneuver seizes, retains, and exploits the initiative. Army forces apply combat power from unexpected directions, achieve surprise, and render an enemy force unable to respond effectively. ADP1, Chapter 2-28. Wide area security is the application of the elements of combat power to protect populations, unified action partners, infrastructure, and activities to deny enemy forces positions of advantage across large expanses, to consolidate gains, and to retain the initiative. Wide area security includes 6 stability tasks in support of a host nation. Establish civil security. Establish civil control. Restore essential services. Support governance. Support economic and infrastructure development. And conduct security cooperation. ADP 1, Chapter 2-29. Armored and mechanized operations provide the capability to conduct sustained and large-scale ground combat operations. The Army has the unique capability to employ large formations of armored, mechanized, and motorized forces that provide protected ground mobility and firepower. These forces can be an asymmetric advantage when used against an enemy force without comparable capability, and they may be used to defeat an enemy's anti-access and area denial measures when they employed from offset objectives. Armored, mechanized, and motorized forces are an essential part of the joint force as a maneuver force in close combat. Armored and mechanized forces serve as a deterrent to armed conflict and can be deployed worldwide. ADP 1 Chapter 2-30. The Army uses airborne and air assault operations as part of the joint force to protect large military forces rapidly into an operational area, sustain those forces in the face of armed opposition, and if necessary, defeat enemy anti-access and area denial capabilities. Projecting and sustaining airborne and air assault forces requires a capability to secure multiple entry points into an operational area. The joint force application of airborne and air assault operations for forcible entry gives leaders flexibility and depth to set conditions. Airborne and air assault operations capitalize on mobility to surprise an enemy force, seize a lodgment, and gain the initiative. Airborne operations are unique from other operations in that they can project and deliver operationally significant forces over strategic distances. Special operations. ADP 1, Chapter 2-31. Special operations require unique modes of employment, tactics, equipment, and training. Army Special Operation Forces provide combatant commanders with precise lethal and non-lethal capabilities. These capabilities include special warfare, and surgical strike operations in hostile, denied, or politically sensitive areas. These operations may be time sensitive, clandestine, low visibility, and high risk. Special operation forces possess uniquely assessed, organized, trained, and equipped soldiers. The interdependence of special operations and conventional forces gained by the right mix of complementary and reinforces capabilities enhances success throughout the range of military operations across the competition continuum. Set and sustain the theater for the joint force. ADP1 Chapter 2 32. The Army's ability to set and sustain the theater is essential to allowing the joint force to seize the initiative while restricting an enemy force's options. Setting the theater for the joint force includes the establishment of access and infrastructure to support joint force operations. The Army possesses unique capabilities to establish and maintain vital infrastructure and support the joint force commander. These capabilities include intelligence support, communications, port and airfield opening, logistics, ground-based air defense, chemical defense, and reception, staging, onward movement, and integration. Sustaining the theater for the joint force includes theater sustainment and meeting executive agent responsibilities, maintaining critical infrastructure, as well as sustaining joint forces, unified action partners, and multinational forces is accomplished through the Army's support to other services. Executive Agent and Title 10 USC requirements. The Army uses Army Service Component Commands, forward deployed forces, and rotational forces to develop, sustain, and operate this theater structure. Integrate national, multinational, and joint power on land. ADP 1, Chapter 2 33. The Army has the largest number of headquarters that are joint task force headquarters capable and can combine all elements of national, multinational, and joint power. Army headquarters are designed to be the core components that integrate unified action partner capabilities into a service headquarters or rapidly transition from a service headquarters into a joint or multinational joint task force or land component command. These headquarters provide the capability to plan, prepare, execute, and assess joint and multinational operations. Army forces support partners with situational understanding, security, and logistics. Army forces ensure combatant commanders possess the ability to reinforce and sustain land forces rapidly through forward positioning, theater infrastructure capabilities, and the use of pre-positioned equipment and supplies. Army headquarters and forces help impose order, to chaotic situations and synchronize plans, programs, and efforts necessary to accomplish the mission. Unified Land Operations, ADP1, Chapter 2-34. Army forces accomplish their missions through the operational concept called Unified Land Operations. Unified Land Operations is the simultaneous execution of offense, defense, stability, and defense support of civil authorities across multiple domains to shape operational environments, prevent conflict, prevail in large-scale ground combat, and consolidate gains as part of unified action. Army forces defeat enemy forces, control terrain, protect populations, and preserve joint force freedom of action in the land domain by applying the Army core competencies. Army operations conducted overseas encompass offensive, defensive, and stability operations. Within the United States, the Army supports civil authorities through DSCA. If enemy forces threaten the homeland, Army forces combine offense and defense with DSCA. The effort accorded to each element is proportional to the mission and varies with the situation and conditions of an operational environment. ADP 1, Chapter 2-35. During operations, Army forces enable joint force freedom of action by denying enemy forces the ability to operate uncontested in domains other than land wherever possible. Leaders synchronize the efforts of unified action partners across multiple domains to ensure unity of effort. Army forces adapt continuously to seize, retain, and exploit the initiative. Unified land operations create multiple dilemmas for the enemy by placing enemy forces and objectives at risk. Army forces have the mobility, protection, and firepower necessary to strike enemy forces unexpectedly from many directions, creating multiple dilemmas for the enemy commander. Even when conducting dispersed operations, mobile combined arms teams exercising mission command can concentrate combat power rapidly to isolate enemy forces, attack critical enemy assets, and exploit opportunities. Mission Command, ADP 1, Chapter 2-36. Mission Command is an approach that empowers subordinates and is necessary for success in complex and ambiguous environments. 200 years ago, commanders could generally see the entire battlefield on which they fought, as well as the friendly and enemy forces on that ground. This meant that commanders could personally observe situations, make decisions, and closely control their forces during battle. ADP 1, Chapter 2-37. By the time of the Civil War, the growth of armies in size and complexity extended forces beyond the direct view of one person. Commanders could no longer personally control all the forces under their command. As a result, American commanders began to practice an approach that favored decentralized execution. This approach meant using mission orders that emphasize the purpose of an operation to achieve a desired end state rather than the accomplishment of individual tasks. Subordinate leaders at all echelons were required to exercise initiative within the commander's intent to accomplish missions. ADP 2-38. The 1905 Field Service Regulation first codified these ideas. It contained the following passage that served as an early explanation of the mission command approach. An order should not trespass on the province of the subordinate. It should contain everything which is beyond the independent authority of the subordinate, but nothing more. When the transmission of orders involves considerable period of time during which the situation may change, detailed instructions are to be avoided. The same rule holds when orders may have to be carried out under circumstances, which the originator of the order cannot completely forecast. In such cases, letters of guidance are more appropriate. It should lay stress upon the object to be attained and leave open the means to be employed. ADP 1, Chapter 2-39. Subsequent versions of our Army's operations manual have built on this idea. Mission command is the Army's approach to command and control. Over time, changes within operational environments require the Army to decentralize operations to the maximum extent possible. Mission command allows for the empowerment of subordinates to exercise disciplined initiative and implement decisions based on their understanding of the commander's intent rather than a directed order or task. ADP 1, Chapter 2-40. Mission command requires leaders at the lowest practical echelon to seize, retain, and exploit the initiative by directing action under varying degrees of uncertainty. Commanders seek to counter the uncertainty of an environment by empowering subordinates at the lowest level to make decisions, act, and quickly adapt to changing circumstances. These situations may lead a subordinate to deviate from the initial directive as long as it is within the desired commander's intent. Mission command is based on mutual trust and a shared understanding of purpose among commanders, subordinates, and unified action partners. In 1941, Admiral E. J. King stressed the importance of training leaders and units in mission command. If subordinates are deprived, as they now are, of that training and experience which will enable them to act on their own, if they do not know by constant practice how to exercise initiative of the subordinates, if they are reluctant, afraid to act because they are accustomed to detailed orders and instructions, if they're not habituated to think, to judge, to decide, and to act for themselves in their several echelons of command, we shall be in sorry case when the time of active operations arrives. ADP1, Chapter 2-41. Mission command requires a command climate in which commanders encourage subordinates to accept risk and exercise disciplined initiative to seize opportunities and to counter threats, all within the commander's intent. Commanders realize that subordinates will make errors. Successful commanders allow subordinates to learn through their mistakes and develop experience. With an accepting command climate, subordinates gain the experience required to operate on their own. Using mission orders, commanders focus on the purpose of the operation rather on the details of how to perform assigned tasks. This focus minimizes centralized control and allows subordinates the greatest freedom of action. When delegating authority to subordinates, commanders set the necessary condition for success by allocating appropriate resources to subordinates based on assigned tasks and conducting shaping operations that enable their subordinates' success. ADP 1 Chapter 2-42. Effective operations are possible when commanders have the expertise and communications to synchronize Army, joint and multinational combat power, and to integrate the effects of unified action partners. Commanders, supported by their staffs, use the operations process to drive the conceptual and detailed planning necessary to understand, visualize, and describe their operational environments. Make and articulate decisions and direct, lead, and assess military operations. The operations process of plan, prepare, execute, and assess enables Army forces to integrate joint, multinational, and other unified action partner capabilities throughout operations. ADP 1 Chapter 2-43. Commanders cannot exercise command and control alone. The science of control, regulating, monitoring, and directing unit actions requires sophisticated and rugged information systems along with a well-trained staff to employ appropriate processes. Even knowledgeable and charismatic commanders cannot control everything beyond their immediate surroundings without supporting personnel, networks, information systems, processes and procedures, and facilities and equipment. These components, as well as space and cyber capabilities, help commanders understand situations to make and implement better decisions. That was Army Doctrine Publication 1, Chapter 2, Today's Army. If you have not already, please subscribe. And tell me what part of ADP 1, Chapter 2 impacted you the most and why. I am looking forward to see your comments. Remember to continue and study through Soldier Study Time. Ciao.